Hi, I'm Atomicus from OWKings.com, and today I'll talk about Pharah on Einchenwalde, anything from team compositions to different engagement angles and whatnot. As of yet, Pharah works against certain compositions, primarily ones that don't have that many hitscan heroes such as McCree, Widowmaker, and Soldier 76. Before we continue, make sure you check out the main guide for Pharah since I'll skip the basic stuff about her in this video. Einchenwalde is a great map for Pharah since it offers a variety of flanking paths but also choke points that helps her punish the enemy team if they don't have any shields. As per usual, I'll cover the attack side in the beginning. First of all, I'll talk about the comps that helps Pharah the most on this map. The standard dive comp can be used on this map with some small changes to the team roster. D.Va, Winston, Genji, Ana and Lucio or Zen can easily help Pharah secure the needed kills on any hitscan heroes that might contest her. Zen can potentially help much more than Lucio can in the end, especially on non-King of the Hill maps. Replacing Ana with a Tracer can also work if you feel strong about your DPS players, and the potential snowball momentum with this roster can become quite high. This is a comp that is very strong against poke comps, the ones that include snipers or key targets. This dive comp is quite common on the first point of Einchenwalde due to the main choke points that it has. You can dive on a certain enemy and burst him down with your mobile roster of heroes. In this case, since you're playing Pharah, you want to dive the hitscan heroes that can potentially contest you. The other comp that is usually used on hybrid and payload maps involves Reinhardt, Soldier 76, Zarya or Roadhog, Ana, and Zen or Lucio. This comp is more about winning the shield battles and dealing damage from afar as Pharah. You can still engage if you have a Lucio, but you'll usually be alone if you decide to flank. Now keep in mind that you should consider your options based on your current comp, and that throughout the match you'll have to adopt a different approach for each point, as the enemy team might swap their team composition to something different to potentially counter you. Starting off on attack, there's a couple of paths that you can use as Pharah for the first point. The main path can be used for scouting and when the enemy team doesn't have any hitscan heroes that can contest you in the first place. Another way of approaching the point is by flying above the roof on the left side. This is usually risky if the enemy team has long-range hitscan heroes because you can potentially end up cut off from your team. There's also not much cover that you can use besides the tower, so long-range hitscan heroes have higher chances of picking you off in this area. However, if your team manages to rush in through the choke point and regroup with you here, you can continue dealing damage from afar while slowly pushing towards the point. Keep in mind that you can flank around the tower when the enemy team rotates towards the point to deal with your team. Now the path that I recommend and use the most is the one on the right. As Pharah, you can fly all the way around the wall and arrive behind enemy lines. This works best when you have a Mercy since you would be alone with no support otherwise. Once you're behind enemy lines, you should focus on certain key targets depending on what they have. Soldier 76 and Ana are the biggest priorities, but if they have a Symmetra or Tourbillon, consider taking care of them so you can allow your team to push in through the choke point and help you out towards the point. Usually this is a good spot to use, especially since Mercy can stay in the corridor and be safe overall. You can take care of any respawn players that are going through the point, and you can also cover the balcony on the other side. Now the path that I recommend and use the most is the one on the right. As Pharah, you can fly all the way around the wall and arrive behind enemy lines. This works best when you have a Mercy since you would be alone with no support otherwise. Once you're behind enemy lines, you should focus on certain key targets depending on what they have. Soldier 76 and Ana are the biggest priorities, but if they have a Symmetra or Tourbillon, consider taking care of them so you can allow your team to push in through the choke point and help you out towards the point. Usually this is a good spot to use, especially since Mercy can stay in the corridor and be safe overall. You can take care of any respawn players that are going through the point, and you can also cover the balcony on the other side. In the end, you can even just distract the enemy team while your team is pushing, so you don't need to fully commit when you're behind enemy lines. Always try to communicate with your team so you have a higher chance of staying alive and picking off the right heroes. For the second part of the map, things can become quite hard for Pharah. This is mostly due to the fact that most teams prefer having several hitscan players on top of the castle walls. If you have a dive comp, then Pharah can still work since you can get supported and focus down the hitscan players on the wall. If by any chance they don't have any hitscan heroes, then you'll be able to take advantage of all of this open space and easily punish the enemy team. Since there are so many ways how the team fights can go for this part, I'll focus on the worst scenario where the enemy team has at least one hitscan hero. In this case, the defending team usually won't drop from the wall until the payload gets closer to the bridge. Because of this, the main goal here is for you to try to push them off the wall with your concussive blast. You can accomplish that by heading through the castle and using your jump jet to reach the wall from behind. This gives you a nice angle, and it works even if they have a Reinhardt shield unless he knows you're coming from behind. Once you push them off, then you can join your team and just deal damage from the high ground. Remember to prioritize the hitscan hero so you can't be eliminated by them. Once the payload is getting closer to the bridge, the enemy team will usually split into two groups. One of them still holding on the main wall, while the other is trying to contest the payload. At this point, the focus should be eliminating the group that's holding on the wall, especially since only long-range heroes hold there usually. You can try getting there together with your team either through the castle or by flanking alone by using the passages below the castle. You can also just fly to the castle wall as long as you're using the cover to not get spotted by the hitscan heroes holding up here. Same strategy like before can still be used, so if you manage to push someone off the wall with your concussive blast, try focusing them down as soon as possible with your team. Sometimes, the enemy team will still be holding on the wall grouped up, so in this case, if you have a standard comp with a Reinhardt shield, you can also try forcing them to drop down on the payload. In this scenario, you want to take advantage of your team when they are contesting the payload and try to pick off anyone that's on the wall while they're distracted. So overall, try scouting where any hitscan heroes are holding and use the castle's layout to your advantage in order to potentially surprise and pick off any enemy players if possible. When the payload is on the bridge or close to the gate, you will have higher chances of knocking people off with your concussive blast, so try using it as much as possible. Even if you don't manage to pick someone off with it, just pushing people around can still benefit your team, so keep that in mind here. So, the shortest path to the payload now is going through the castle. However, the enemy team can easily shut down this doorway, so your team might need to take the long way sometimes. Regardless of this, you want to focus on getting near the gate and using these platforms to be annoying in the backline. If you manage to successfully distract the enemy team here, then your own team might be able to push directly through the castle, so try timing this as best as you can. If it's too hard using the platforms here and you're getting shot down most of the time, you can also try taking it slow by shooting rockets from afar while sitting on the wall. If you manage to get a pick or your team is closing in on the payload or the gate, you can try engaging above the gate once again. Once you're in this area, keep in mind that there's a mega health pack here that you can use. You might also be able to bait someone to chase you inside here, which should allow you to pick them off alone since it's easy to use your rockets in these rooms. From here you can just use the gap in the gate to harass the enemy while your team is pushing the payload. The last stretch for this map is pretty much straightforward. Not a lot of flanking paths and the area itself is relatively small compared to the rest of the map. You won't be able to fly around that much, so the best way of pushing here is by slowly advancing with the payload while spamming rockets towards the enemy team. If they have hitscan heroes holding on the balcony in the far back, then you can try flanking them by taking the left path which leads to the balcony. This should be your focus even if they don't have any heroes that can contest you, since you want the high ground and being on the balcony there can punish the enemy team if they can't do anything about it. If they have a diva or anything else that can deny the balcony area, then just stick to spamming rockets while pushing the payload. When the payload gets closer to the throne, then you can start using the chandeliers to shoot rockets from above. This gives you a nice high ground advantage, but also the ability to cover the doorways that lead to the enemy team's spawning room. At this stage, you can just fly between the balconies here while picking off any enemies that are contesting the payload. Using your barrage offensively on this map is best done by flanking and surprising any key heroes that might contest you. On the first point, going around from the right side works really well, while for the second part, you can use the passages below the castle to unleash your barrage from behind. You can also fly under the bridge to get behind the enemy team and potentially have a good barrage opportunity. Lastly, for the last point, your best bet is by using the left path and either use it solo on anyone holding on the balcony or on the enemy team. Of course, if you can combo your barrage with a Zarya, Reinhardt or Mei ulti, then go for that instead. Alright, so that's Pharah on attack for Einchenwalde. Take it easy and focus on flanking properly if they have hitscan heroes that can contest you. When it comes to defending, things are not that different from when you're attacking in terms of positioning and playstyle as Pharah. Starting off with the first point, you'll mostly be sitting in the back, spamming the main choke points. If the enemy team has their own Pharah, then you should keep in mind the flanking routes that I showed you on the attacking side. Expect the enemy Pharah to use them, so be ready to contest her when needed. At the beginning of the round, you can also shoot a couple of rockets at the enemy team's spawn while flying near this roof. This will help you build up your ulti early on, especially if they don't have any shields when they come out. When the team fights are starting to take place near the point, you can either hold passively on the balcony, or you can fly above while using the tower as cover, potentially attacking the backline if you see a good opportunity. Moving on to the second stage of the map, the main goal here is keeping the high ground advantage. Just hold on top of the wall while spamming rockets on the enemy team once they go through the gate. If your team decides to drop down on them, follow up and focus on any support or hitscan heroes if they have any. If the enemy team has a dive comp, then expect them to jump on the wall. In this case, you should position yourself more in the back to avoid being picked up easily. Just like on defense, once the payload is near the bridge, you can start using your concussive blast to potentially knock people off the map. At this stage, you should always try to go left on the wall so you can flank the enemy team as they push the payload. When you respawn, you can also go through the right side and fly under the bridge to flank the enemy team in a different way. This usually works best if you have your barrage up. So overall, when it comes to the second stage of this map, you want to keep control of the high ground and keep in mind all the underground passages that the enemy team could use against you. A tracer could easily sneak on you and pick you off if you're not paying attention, so just because you're sitting on the wall, it doesn't mean you're completely safe. In the end, it all depends on what comp they have. The third and final part of the map is pretty much the same as on offense, nothing too complicated overall. Just spam rockets from afar and try breaking the enemy shield if they have any. Once the payload comes close enough to the last corner, you can start using the right path to flank the enemy team. You can also use the chandeliers here as well, especially when the payload gets really close to the throne. Using your barrage on your own is slightly harder on defense, mostly due to the fact that you won't be flanking as often as on offense. Because of this, the best way to use it is to combo with any heroes that have synergy with you. Overall, Einchenwalde is a map where Pharah can work really well if played properly, but if you feel like you're heavily contested by any hitscan heroes, then you should consider swapping to a different hero to help your team. This brings us to the end of another guide for Pharah, this time on Einchenwalde. As always, I hope you have learned some new things, and on that note, thanks for watching and see you next time. Take care.